pumped today. A great friend of mine, an old friend, a guy that was instrumental in my first part of my so-called music career. We've been friends for a million years. He's had a lot of success in different areas, especially in radio and music and records. He's done it all. And we're going to talk about a big record that he co-produced called Smokin in the Boys' Room, Brownsville Station. I'm sure you all remember it. But we're also going to talk about some other things, too, about a little bit about his radio career, because he did a lot of stuff, some things on there that were brand new things that kind of changed pop music. So if you would, please welcome to the program right now my very good dear friend, Mr. Eric Stevens. Good morning, Eric.
Hi, Jerry. How are you this morning?
I'm doing terrific. I'm doing great, and I'm so happy you're on the show, and we got so much to talk about. We're going to talk about Smokin in the Boys' Room and the song and how that happened, but what I want to do is jump back before that just for a little bit and talk about your career in radio, because you, at the age, I think, of 19, became music director of Wixie Radio in Cleveland, which was unbelievable in itself. But you guys, when I was growing up and listening to pop radio, they would play a couple of records in commercials, couple of records, and you guys, I think, started the 6-packs in a row and all that. So tell us how you got into, at the age of 19, at Wixie Radio, and how all that worked and some of the stuff you guys were doing.
Well, I actually have to go back to a little bit before that, because I started in radio at what then was KYW Radio in Cleveland, a 50,000-watt clear channel radio station.
Big station, huge station.
In high school,
yeah.
And pretending to attend high school every day while I was really already in radio. And I ended up producing a program called Runyon and Folks, which was a public service program on Sunday night that they kind of had to do in those days. Well, what happened at KYW is we actually started playing hits before the radio station did, because they weren't tuned into what was actually going on at the time. So, for example, I would pick all the music, and Jim Runyon got on the air and said, Eric Stevens has done it again. He's given me a record by two guys that sound like they should run a shoe store.
Who's that?
Here they are, Simon and Garfunkel.
Shoe store, that's too funny.
Yeah, and because at the time, they were nothing.
Okay, so all right, so Eric, so how did we get to Wixie? How did that happen?
There was a new station that had just come on the air, and I knew the program director through my dad, who was a record promotion person, and went out there, and he gave me what was called a gopher job, which means go for this, go for that, and it was exactly the right place to be, because the owner, one of the owners of the station, one of the three owners of the station, was a guy by the name of Norman Wayne. And he was very much into young talent and took a lot of risks with me. And I've talked to him about that since. At any rate, it was just the perfect place to be for me, because someone walked through and said, "Hey, Eric, you want to write a James Brown promo?" And I said, "Absolutely." And within 4 to 6 months, I was production director of Wixie. And then very soon thereafter, I became music director of Wixie. And skipping forward, we were this small company, 5,000 watts, and we knocked WKYC out of the picture. They dropped the rock format. Metro Media at the time owned WHK, which was a giant company, and little us, we beat both of them, so we were the only top 40 station in Cleveland. And then the program director at the time said, "I'm tired of the way the music sounds. I want you to pre-program everything." So I became probably the first person in the country that pre-programmed every song in order.
Okay, so you had this. You spent a lot of time in radio, and you were cooking Wixie's cooking. And at some point, somewhere along 1969 in that area, I think, you formed a production company in Cleveland to actually start producing some original material. And you had Damnation of Adam Blessing, as I remember, and you had Alex Bevan, who was a very big guy locally, folk singer type. And you had a band called Wild Butter. I know a lot about them because I was in the band. That's how you and I met. That's how we met, and you had produced all these groups, and we all had various degrees of success. But at some point, around 72, 73, you hooked up with Brownsville Station, and I guess a guy named Doug Morris. Tell us about how you met how you got involved in that project. For the album was called Yeah, come out in '73. You co-produced or produced that album. Tell us about that. How did you get involved in that project?
Well, Alex Bevan was on Big Tree Records, and we kind of did what now would be called like a James Taylor lookalike album, meaning it was a produced record with a folk artist.
Okay.
And I believe they liked the production, and we were very connected in the music business, etc. And Doug had me go up and listen to Brownsville Station, and they had an album on Warner Brothers. It was somewhat successful, and I liked the group, and the decision was made that I would produce their first album. And we did it in Cleveland, and quite frankly, the album, I can say now, I'll take responsibility for this as well. It just didn't come out the way that we wanted it to, including me. I mean, it just wasn't capturing the essence of this group. So the decision was made then that Doug would co-produce the next album, and we would do it in New York. So I went into New York, and Doug would come in to be part of producing the songs he thought were the hits on the album, and then he would leave me and Mike DeLug, who ended up doing Barry Manilow and a lot of other artists, but he was the engineer on the sessions, and he and I would do the rest. So we came to this song called Smokin' in the Boys' Room, and I said to the guys in Brownsville Station, this sounds like Jailhouse Rock, kind of sped up a little bit. Why don't we make this sound like an old rock and roll record? So basically, we used a harmonica in the record, which was played through what's called a pig nose
amp, little amp, tiny amp.
amplifier.
Yeah, tiny amp.
Pig nose amp, which gave it a really distorted kind of sound. And we did the song, and I'm not telling you that I thought it was a hit, but we did it, and in the middle of this, I got a call that Norman Wayne wanted me to come back to Wixie. And I had chart records, but chart records don't necessarily create revenue. So I was ready to get out of producing records. I needed to come in at another point in the production process. So I wasn't really the best producer in the world because of that. But what happened, although I did some records that I still look back on that were very good, but we did Smokin' in the Boys' Room. So skipping forward, it's time to mix, and Doug would come in for the songs he thought were the hits, and then Mickey, we called him Mickey, Mike DeLug and I would mix the rest of the songs. So we came to Smokin' in the Boys' Room, and I now know I can leave New York. This is how crazy the music business can be and how hits are made and not made. I wanted to leave New York and get home because I could go back to Wixie, which I did for 9 months at the time. And we're mixing Smokin' in the Boys' Room, and somewhere in the middle of the guitar solo, I heard that it was a little too soft, and I knocked it up about something like 1.5 to 2 dB, which is a lot. He looked at me, I said, did you hear the guitar? And he said, yeah. He said, did you hear the end? I said, yeah. He said, what do you want to do? I said, screw it. That's it. We're done. So I took the tapes back up to Doug Morris's office because they would be tapes, and we came to Smokin' in the Boys' Room. Now, again, when I tell the rest of this story, there were companies that turned down the Beatles because it's a very subjective judgment. So Doug Morris is a music genius and has had extraordinary success through the years. So saying that he didn't like this song really means nothing, because everyone that's in the business has said they don't like the song that went to #1. And we got to Smokin' in the Boys' Room, and Doug looked at me and said, that's the biggest piece of shit I ever heard. It's an embarrassment. Don't use it. And I said, okay, I won't. Because I didn't know it was going to be a hit, and I just wanted to, quite frankly, get back to Cleveland. I would love to tell you I was a genius when I did this, but I just wanted to leave. And then he said, oh, I know what I said to him. Okay, edit. So he said, it's the worst piece of shit. It's an embarrassment. And And I said, well, I'm not disagreeing with that necessarily or agreeing with it. But if we don't use this song on the album, we don't have enough songs to make a full album.
Unbelievable.
In other words, there wasn't enough time to make it. So he said then, cut off the opening, where Cub Coda, who's since passed away, said, have you ever had one of those days, blah, blah. He talked the opening. And I wish I would have said, no, that's going to be the call to arms for this record across America for every teenage boy. But I said, Doug, I don't know if I can even edit that off, and then we're going to get into a debate with the group, a creative debate with the group, even if I can do it, which I don't think I can, and make it work. He said, okay, then bury it. Make it the last song on side 2. I said, okay. And I went back and did what we called mastering, did the master for the final album. And I went back home, and I went back to Wixie for a little bit of time. And the album came out, and it was the first album I had ever done where it came in, and I didn't even open the album up. It was still in what they called shrink wrap.
Right. And
I put it in the closet and forgot about it because I was now moving on. I get a call from Doug when I'm at the radio station, and in those days, a hit might be called a home run. And Doug called me up and says, it's a homer. It's a homer. And I said, I thought he was calling about the new logo or something else because now I'm back in the radio station.
Right.
And I said, what's a home run? He said, Smokin. So we went from, like we all have done, we went from we hate it to we're on a first-name basis with it, and some little station, which of course doesn't happen now, played it in some place like Maine, and the phones rang off the hook, and somehow this guy, wherever it was, discovered it as the last song on side 2, played it, and the phones went crazy, and then the rest is history.
Now, Eric, let me ask you something. Your dad Perry Stevens, was a big promotion guy and also a songwriter. I think he had a hit song. But tell us a little bit about your father.
Well, my dad was the first influence and a major influence in my career, and quite frankly, without him, I wouldn't have gotten the start that I did. And sometimes you need a start. Now, obviously, if I wouldn't have had what some people perceived as real talent, the fact that he got me started in the business by just being around it, and he knew people, that was a huge plus. And, I always am thankful about that because when I walked into the program director's office at Wixie, he knew my dad, which gave me a leg up to at least get my foot in the door. Then it was up to me to get somebody to put their foot in my rear end. And people like my wife and my mom get on this roller coaster with creative people like us, and God love them because it's a wild ride, and they both have stuck with it, for the whole time, and, so I'm very fortunate to have the parents that I do.
Well, Eric, thanks so much for being on the program today. It's fascinating. You've done so many great things. Eric Stevens Marketing in Cleveland, folks, if you want to get hold of Eric. Thanks again, Eric, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Stevens.